Hello, my name is Gail Langellotto and I am the statewide Extension Master Gardener Coordinator for Oregon State University, and it is my pleasure to talk to you today about how researchers might partner with Extension Master Gardener volunteer programs to better monitor bee communities across the United States. My talk is going to be broken into 3 parts. First, I want to set some context by talking about the scope and the scale of Extension Master Gardener programs, with a specific focus on what we do in Oregon, but many of the parts are also generalizable to other parts of the United States. Second, I want to work through 4 opportunities for working with Master Gardeners on bee monitoring programs as a way to stimulate discussion and conversation about how Master Gardeners might be involved in your community science project. Finally, I want to end with tips for building a positive collaboration with Extension Master Gardener staff and volunteers so that the entire endeavor is mutually beneficial and synergistic, both for researchers as well as for Extension faculty, staff, and volunteers. At its core, the Master Gardener program is a Train the Trainer program, where university extension personnel provide a high-quality horticulture course to members of the general public, and in return, those folks, who we call Extension Master Gardeners, agree to share that knowledge with the general public. A core focus of the Master Gardener program and information sharing occurs when volunteers receive and reply to the public's gardening questions. The need to create a system to receive and reply to the public's gardening questions really was a historical catalyst for the program, and it remains a core focus of what we continue to do today. In these 2 graphs, you can see the number of questions that Extension Master Gardener volunteers in Oregon answered through just one venue that we have available for submitting questions, Oregon's Ask Extension service. And you can see that over the past couple of years, the number of questions submitted to and answered through the service has more than doubled. On the right hand of the slide, you can see that Master Gardener volunteers field and reply to the vast majority of these questions. There is simply no way that we would be able to meet the public's demand and desire for gardening information and supports if it weren't for the more than 2,000 Master Gardener volunteers that we have here in Oregon. The Train the Trainer model of the Master Gardener program can be summed up as: first you learn, then you share what you learn, ultimately giving of your time and knowledge to grow gardening in your local community. The way that the program is broken up is that you have relatively different levels of expectation in the first year of your service as a volunteer versus whether or not you're continuing on in the program. In the first year of service, you receive at least 40 hours of training in horticultural topics that are relevant to your region. Notably, instruction in entomology and pollinators is included in the core curriculum of most Master Gardener training programs. At the end of your training, there's an expectation that you're going to give back a comparable number of hours in volunteer service, supporting gardening projects and needs within your local community. For Master Gardeners who continue with the program, there is a requirement to continue to grow your education and your knowledge with at least 10 hours of continuing education units each year. And since the core of what we do in the Master Gardener program is volunteer-based community service, there's also the expectation that you will volunteer at least 20 hours each year in order to maintain your certification as a Master Gardener volunteer. Across the United States, Extension Master Gardener programs are present in 49 of the 50 U.S. states. Every state in the nation has a Master Gardener program, but the program in Massachusetts is operated as an independent nonprofit, unaffiliated with their state's land-grant institution. All other Master Gardener programs in the United States are affiliated with their state's land grant. Collectively, Master Gardeners are quite a force, with nearly 85,000 volunteers who annually give 3.1 million hours of community service and make over 8.4 million direct contacts with the public each year. The balance of the community service requirements for Extension Master Gardener volunteers provides a lot of opportunities to involve volunteers in community science projects. For example, in Oregon, at least half of the minimum required volunteer service hours must be focused on direct education and outreach. Examples of direct education and outreach include answering gardening questions at a plant clinic hotline, teaching a class at a local community center, or hosting a hands-on workshop at a local community garden. The other half of the Master Gardener's volunteer service hours can be put towards a variety of approved community service projects, including community science efforts. We just want to make sure that whatever the project is, that it aligns with our program priorities, which you can see here on the right hand of the slide. Notably, insect identification and the conservation of native species, two topics that are germane to bee monitoring efforts, are programmatic priorities for Oregon's Extension Master Gardener program, and I would venture to guess that they're high priorities for most other Master Gardener programs in the United States. There are at least 4 ways that I can see Extension Master Gardener volunteers supporting bee monitoring programs and efforts. These include providing access to garden study sites, participation in seasonal bioblitzes, participation in locally based and structured monitoring programs, and serving as a core of trainees or recruits for more intensive and advanced monitoring programs. On this last point, my colleague at Oregon State University, Dr. Andoni Melithopoulos, has created an amazing bee monitoring project for the state known as the Oregon Bee Atlas. Many of Andoni's most passionate volunteers, which are known as Master Melitologists, came from the Master Gardener program. And in fact, when I asked Andoni how many of the Master Melitologists are Master Gardeners or recruited from the Master Gardener program in the state, he estimates that it's about 40%. In terms of the other ways that Master Gardener volunteers can support bee monitoring programs and efforts, one is that they can provide access to garden study sites, allowing for long-term monitoring of bees over extended periods of time. In fact, I've leveraged relationships with Master Gardener volunteer programs to monitor bees over 3 to 4 years in Portland, Oregon gardens and in gardens in Westchester County within New York State. Visiting and sampling these gardens takes a lot of time. This is the type of project that would be more appropriate for a graduate student project, but it's also a lot of fun. It's basically like going on a garden tour on a regular basis. Through long-term monitoring of these gardens, we're able to understand how different gardening practices and plantings can support robust bee communities and the relative importance of local within garden characteristics versus landscape level context on bees. Long-term monitoring of these sites can also help track the spread and establishment of non-native species, and in some cases can find incipient species newly described and named by science. In the case that I have on this slide, Lasioglossum asheri, named after the incomparable John Asher, was collected by Evelyn Fettridge when she was a master's student in my laboratory when I was at Fordham University. And Evelyn collected this Lasioglossum species from the garden of Evelyn Fellows, who opened up her garden to us for 4 years and allowed us to basically be in her backyard studying bees. Master Gardener volunteers can also be involved in short-term bioblitzes and other sampling efforts. Here in Oregon, we annually hold spring, summer, and fall bioblitzes as a way to help folks become familiar with the diversity of animals and non-cultivated plants in their garden. We couple the bioblitzes with training opportunities focused on how to use iNaturalist. And then on the day of the bioblitz, we make sure to provide taxonomic and ID assistance to gardeners as they upload their observations to our iNaturalist project. In 2021, for example, we enrolled 466 Master Gardener volunteers in our iNaturalist training courses, and 177 of them passed the assessments with flying colors. An additional 19 Master Gardener volunteers came to a several-hour hands-on workshop really focused on helping to troubleshoot some of the issues that they were having using the iNaturalist program on their mobile phone or on their computer. Across the 3 bioblitzes that we held in 2021, more than 100 people participated, made almost 2,000 observations, and observed 1,000 unique taxa, over 1,000 unique taxa. Now, these specific efforts were focused on understanding how the extent of overall garden-based biodiversity, but these efforts could easily be retooled to focus on bees and other pollinators. Master Gardener volunteers in my area are really enthusiastic about opportunities to contribute to science in ways that are convenient, structured, and easy to access. For example, one of the most popular community science projects for Master Gardener volunteers in my state is CocoRa's, the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. Now, for this particular project, volunteers purchase a $15 rain gauge, and they agree to report precipitation on a near daily basis to the CocoRa's database. Their efforts ultimately help to create finer scale understandings of climate and climate change. Now, the Master Gardener volunteers who participate in CocoRa's tell me that they love it because this project is easy, their time spent on the project can be used to help satisfy their volunteer service hour requirement, the data entry portal is very user-friendly, and because the CocoRa's program provides regular updates via newsletters and/or blog posts that helps the community scientists, the Master Gardener volunteers, understand how their data is being used. Now, there are several bee monitoring programs that also provide the same type of local access and structured approach to bee monitoring. I really just want to emphasize that low time investment, ease of data entry, and regular newsletters or blog posts are those things that my volunteers tell me they really appreciate about community science projects. I want to end this presentation by sharing a couple tips for building a positive community science collaboration with Extension Master Gardener programs within your area. First, if you have an idea for what you want to do, reach out to your county or state-based Extension Master Gardener coordinator to discuss your idea. Second, keep in mind that we already have a very robust portfolio of projects and programs that we have running. And our planning year is such, at least here in Oregon, that we have to create a plan of work about the projects and programs we're going to do in the subsequent calendar year. And once we submit that plan of work, we're kind of locked into those projects and programs. So even if you have the most amazing project idea that you want to work with Master Gardener volunteers on, understand that talking to the coordinator early, understanding how they can shift volunteer time and other resources to support your project, that we may not be able to make that happen on a dime, but for worthy projects, stick with us. We can make it happen. It just takes a little bit of planning. You want to make sure that you ask your Master Gardener coordinator that you're working with if they're going to allow volunteer service hours spent on your project to accrue. So it's a benefit to Master Gardener volunteers that if they're able to apply that time spent on your project against their volunteer service requirement, it helps them, it helps you. You really just want to be clear about what the policy is going to be from the outset. You also want to be clear about the educational value of your effort, since Master Gardeners at their core are educators who are going to take what they learn from participation in your project and hopefully share it with others. You really want to think past just using Master Gardeners as folks who can take data and give you data. You really want to think about how you can grow their personal education in ways that can support their role as a community educator focused on sustainable gardening. As much as you can, tie the efforts of your community science project to actions that any gardener can take and that Master Gardeners can teach to promote garden sustainability. Many studies have shown that gardens are really fantastic sites to support pollinator conservation and bee conservation efforts, so that shouldn't be too difficult to do. But the more directly you can make that tie between your project and garden sustainability, the more likely it's going to be adopted and supported by the Master Gardeners. And then finally, many Master Gardener programs have nonprofit associations that could be important collaborators for your project in the future. Many of these nonprofit associations have very robust bank balances of tens of thousands or six-figure bank balances, when they might eventually be able to slot in a line item budget in support of your effort. Those types of things usually take time to evolve, but it could be a conversation that you start thinking about as a way to provide resource sustainability to keep the project going after grant funding for the project is over. I hope that this presentation helps you understand a bit of the context and opportunities for working with Master Gardeners on community science projects. I really love the program and its dedicated core of passionate, smart, and service-oriented volunteers. They love science and are thrilled with opportunities to learn about and participate in the process. They would make excellent partners for community science programs focused on monitoring bees, and I really look forward to seeing how collaborations evolve as we move forward. Thank you for your time.